Hello. Hi, welcome to the YBMB show. My name is Angela Middleton. I'm talking to you from West London. And on this show, we stream it live 3 times a week. We cover body, mind, and business in that order. So on Mondays, we talk about aspects of body transformation. On Wednesday, we talk about mindset. On Friday, we talk about business. And I'm absolutely delighted that today I'm joined by Andy Lopata, a business relationships expert. And the reason that I wanted to bring Andy on today is because really his area of expertise straddles both the mind and business, because from my perspective, I think mindset is probably our biggest asset more than anything. And if you think about the mindset, one of the main factors of that, I believe, is the relationships that you have and the people that you spend your time with. And Andy has a very interesting perspective on business relationships. In fact, Andy has sort of worked in this area for many, many years and is a best-selling author, has actually written 4 best-selling books and has actually launched a 5th book as well. So Andy, thank you so much for joining me. I know how busy you are at the minute, and it's just going to be a really interesting discussion, I think, because it's very of the moment.
Thank you very much for inviting me on, Angela. It's I haven't really had my work talked about in terms of mindset before, but it absolutely is right the way across the spectrum, and so many of the obstacles to putting good business practice in place is mindset related.
Completely. There's a couple of things that I wanted to just to mention about your book, really, the things that struck me. You said, it's called Connected Leadership, How Professional Relationships Underpin Executive Success. The emphasis is on executive and business success. But you then say that you can often tell the quality of a leader not just from the caliber of his or her relationships, but by the ease with which they draw on them and the speed and willingness with which people respond. And so it's, this whole thing about relationships is not necessarily who you spend your time with or who you know. It's much deeper than that. It's about the interaction with them, isn't it? And so it'd be lovely to sort of hear a bit more on your philosophy of that.
It is. My business strapline for years has been connecting is not enough, because I've been so frustrated, and this goes back a long time, about the culture of just collecting business cards at an event or collecting contacts on LinkedIn equals success in networking or professional relationships. And it doesn't. Look, if you can build a massive LinkedIn network with 30,000 people, that's a good marketing strategy. But it's not a relationship strategy. So for me, it's conversation over connection is really important. And in the book, Connected Leadership, I introduce 7 stages of professional relationship. So traditionally, when people talk about network, we picture just a box with people in it. And, you get the question, how many people are in your network? And there's been studies on the average size of a network. And I think all of
classic case of sort of quantity over quality in a way. How many followers have you got? How many connections have you got? It's exactly. So often what we get asked.
And it's almost binary, and that totally misunderstands what a network is and the levels within it. So I introduced these 7 stages to say, well, okay, you've got people. Level 1 is recognize. So we spoke at an event a few weeks ago. We meet again, we'll recognize each other, but a few more weeks' time, if we have no other interactions, we'll be complete strangers again. So you're in and you're out, you're in and you're out. So these are moving masses. Then you've got know, like, and trust, the sort of famous Bob Berg saying about people who know, like, and trust you. It's moving through those degrees. Then you've got people who will support you. In other words, if you pick up the phone to them and you ask for their help, they would be happy to give it to you. And then you've got people who advocate for you. In other words, you don't have to pick up the phone. They're supporting you all the time anyway. And then there's friends. So you've got those 7 stages, and you can take people along a journey. And if you reframe the way you look at relationships like that, rather than going out and just connecting mass numbers, I'd rather have a strong network of 100 people at levels 5, 6, and 7 than 2,000, 5,000 people at level 1.
And it's, many people, we work in a lot with young people sort of starting out in their career, etc. But especially in this last year, I've been working with midlife professionals as well, as part of the Your Body Means Business program, where we've been emphasizing the importance of mindset, and in particular the people that they surround themselves with. And I've found myself in discussions where people have said, well, I've got this network, or I've got these relationships, but they're sort of draining. They're draining as opposed to boosting. And there's a couple of ways of sort of looking at it, because one is, okay, well, be quite strategic and sort of create the relationships that you think you need to sort of achieve what you want, whether that's for yourself or for your business or your family or your impact. The other is, oh no, that's a bit too sort of, I don't know, Machiavellian in a way. And yeah, and that's not the right thing to do. So, I mean, how would you sort of look at someone's current network? How should they analyze it? And what would be great things for them to do that sort of is a win-win for everybody?
Well, I talk in the book in Connected Leadership about a blended mindset when it comes to building the right professional relationships. And by that, what I mean is if you look at a spectrum, and on one side of it, you've got what I call a strategic or partnership approach. In other words, I'm looking for people to partner with me. Those are the words of an Italian leadership strategist, Luca Signoretti, who, when I went to see him speak on networking, I said, Luca, I can agree with 90% of what you say, but your approach was much too transaction-based for me. And he said, that's where I want people to start, because I want them to start by recognizing where they can find partners. But if you take too much of a strategic mindset, then your network's going to shrink, not grow, because people will still soon see you as someone who's just taking. If you go the other way, the other extreme, and too much of a relationship mindset, which is, I'll see how things go. If I get on with people, I'll stay in touch. And if things work out, that's great. That's a really positive approach as part of an overall strategy. But if you're purely relationship focused, you're going to miss so many opportunities, because you're not seeking to find the right people to help you progress your career or your business, whatever it might be. So you need a blended mindset. You need to have that strategic partnership approach when you say, okay, what am I looking to achieve next? Who do I need who can take me there? And I have a model in the book to help identify where the gaps are, where you need to strengthen relationships, where you have the right relationships, but you're not asking for the right things or asking the right questions, but also to allow for a natural relationship to develop without agenda. And if you have both in place, then you'll have a very powerful network to support you as you move forward.
Because that's interesting, actually, because you sort of touched on collaborations a bit there. And I was talking to somebody last week about innovation in business and the fact that, it is hard to innovate. So how do you innovate in a sort of potentially a flooded market, or in a situation where you're in you're a Me Too business, essentially? And this particular lady, she concluded that she built her business in what appeared to be a flooded market on the back of amazing collaborations. And by collaborating with these different organizations and people, there was a very unique offering in her business. So that was her USP, that was her innovation.
Well, professional relationships lie at the heart of innovation. And I was working with a German medical devices manufacturer in 2018, 2019, because they rely on innovation, and they had brought all of their employees in this particular part of the business from offices all around Germany. I think there were 20 offices, and they built an innovation center where their head office was. And yet people were just still staying in their teams, in their clusters, in their cliques. So they weren't having those conversations. They brought me in to say, okay, we need you to talk to each other. And this comes up again and again. This week, I was speaking to a very senior leader in the US Air Force. And I'm looking at recording a podcast with her and a colleague of hers who's in the Navy next year. And we were talking about how they collaborate with each other. And she said that David, who's in the Navy, is part of an innovation group covering 60 public sector organizations in the US, senior leaders in them, so that they can exchange ideas and they can collaborate and they can work together. And we need to see more of this. And if you build strong relationships with people from diverse sectors, so, okay, they might be public sector, but if you're taking the military and you're taking, let's say, a major government department, and you're taking local government departments and so on, they're going to be facing different challenges. They're going to be facing different conditions and different pushback. You create that spark of innovation, but the diversity is key. And where those things, and what I want to explore with the two of them on the podcast, is where that really, the spark comes that accelerates it, is when you bring in something completely different.
Yeah,
So,
it's interesting, yeah, because I've heard that before, where you think of two entirely what you would think are totally unrelated things, and you think, how could they be connected in some way? And I always remember talking to somebody once about wanting to, he was in insurance, and when you actually delved into what his true love was bloodstock, for the horses, and he ended up creating a business which was reinsuring bloodstock, very highly valuable, and then. It was expertise and sort of passion. And one thing I wanted to ask you was, again, sort of from the mindset perspective, but people have said that they feel isolated, and that there's only so much you can do in Zoom. But you were saying earlier that, you can come across in an office somewhere like a WeWorks, and still people are sitting in their silos. And I know we had an office in Kent, and when we went there, we thought, wow, this is going to be a great opportunity for us for collaborations, because there's all these different businesses. But the truth of the matter was, you had really very little contact. Everybody was in their little sort of shoebox still.
Yeah.
So you can be even more effective or equally effective whether you're face-to-face or via Zoom. It doesn't need to stop you. And I wanted to ask you some sort of strategies, because you've said in your book, the first thing is to identify what your mission is firstly, and then what the gaps are. But then what would you do after that?
Well, once you understand what you want to achieve, and then let's take it a step back. You understand your objective. Within anything you're trying to achieve, there are different stakeholder groups that influence the outcome. So it might be people. If you're looking at business development, for example, let's say winning a new piece of business. So there will be one key stakeholder group might be the client's organization. Another stakeholder group might be the industry that client is in. Another stakeholder group might be other people in a similar role to you who complement what you do, who service the same types of clients. Or the stakeholder groups could even be different departments within that client organization and your own organization. Within each stakeholder group, there are 4 types of people that you need strong relationships with. You've got people who have influence. So they're the ones, one of the biggest mistakes people make is they build a strong relationship with one person in a stakeholder group or in a key organization. And then they don't realize that any decisions are made by committee and are influenced by other people. So you need those people who are listened to, who have gravitas to know you and advocate on your behalf, because very often you're not in those meetings. And this isn't just for sales. This is for career. This is for promotion. It's for so many things. So people who have influence, people who are intermediaries, who open doors for you. So the gatekeepers, if you like, people who are the implementers. So they're actually doing what you're trying to have a say in the process of the implementation of, and then sources of information, ideas, and insights. So that you know what people are thinking, you know what their challenges are, you know how to craft the right message so that you have the influence that we talked about before. So if you can identify who represents those 4 areas, influence, intermediaries, implementers, and insight, you can then say, well, with whom do I have, where are the level of relationships with each of those people? If the relationship is too low, you know you need to build it. If the relationship is strong, but they're not helping you, you know you need to change what you're asking for or the conversation you're having. If you don't have a relationship at all, that's where you need to find your intermediaries and get introduced to them so you can start to build it. And then you go out and you start building a relationship. And this is a medium to long-term strategy. It's not about identifying that person, recognizing you have a relationship level of 0 or 1 with them and going and asking for their help, because they're not invested in helping you.
No, of course not. And that makes me think of people, what we said at the beginning about so many people now have got sort of thousands of connections, and it's almost for the sake of numbers. And they've probably, they may go through the process that you've just said, off the back of what you've just said now, and think, okay, well, I've got this network. and I now need to get some influencers, intermediaries, or whatever the category is. Would you recommend they sort of then, how would they have a look at their existing network, and how could you sort of start to see, because it fails to amaze me when I say to people, have you actually asked your own network? And they say, oh God, no, I'd never sort of tell Facebook that I'm looking for a job. That's embarrassing, So what would you do? What would be your advice with existing networks?
Well, there's two things there. First is to recognize where the right people are in your existing networks. And there's two approaches to that. With the approach that I just outlined with the 4 I's, the stakeholder groups, rather than saying, okay, who are my influencers, who are my intermediaries and so on, you say, who do I know in that stakeholder group? Then you highlight them based on where they are. So that stops any presumption ruling out other people. The second thing you can do, which a lot of people aren't comfortable with, but it's a very powerful exercise, is you map out your network. You sit down with a big sheet of paper or a bit of mind mapping software and you drill down. So you don't say family, you say, my family and my husband or wife's family. And you break the narrower the categories, the more people you'll think about.
Yeah.
So if I said to you, think about your family, you would think probably about your closest family. If I then broke that down into your cousin's branch, you'd think of second cousins that you hadn't come up with originally. So you have families, you have different social groups, friendship groups, and you have your professional network. So people you used to work with, people you work with now, clients, suppliers, colleagues. And so you build these subcategories and you write down as many names as you can think of. And irrespective of their relevance to you and what you do, then just by the names, you just jot notes. What do they do for a living? What are their interests and so on? And suddenly people jump out from the page you hadn't thought of. So those are two things you can do there. In terms, the second part of the question, what's holding us back? I'm embarrassed about posting this on Facebook and so on.
Yeah.
My newer book, so Connected Leadership, came out in the summer. It's a COVID year, 2 books.
Get yourself busy.
Yeah, absolutely. Just Ask came out last week.
Yeah.
And Just Ask is saying, I know that you don't want to ask for help. I know you're embarrassed about it, but you are surrounded by people who want to support you. It's not about just ask a stranger. It's just ask someone who wants to see you succeed. Those people who are levels 4, 5, 6, 7 in those 7 stages of professional relationship, they get pleasure if they can help you succeed. And when you don't ask them, you're denying them pleasure. And the things that hold us back are we don't want to be a burden to other people. We've just established that far from being a burden, you give them pleasure if you make it easy for them to help you.
Yeah. And
we don't want to look weak or vulnerable. That's a huge driver. You said it. I'll be embarrassed to put it out there.
Yeah.
Why? Why are you embarrassed? How many people do you know who have got everything together?
Yeah.
There are people we look at and we think they've got everything together. I'm sure a lot of people think you do. I'm sure a lot of people think I do. Mm-hmm. I don't know about you, Angela. I know there's a lot of stuff going on beneath the surface always that makes me far from, this wonderful, successful, perfect person. I'm sure it's the same for you. In Just Ask, 2 lovely stories that I share in Just Ask came from Hattie Webb. Hattie was a backing singer to Tom Petty and Leonard Cohen with her sister, Charlie. Both Kentish girls, by the way, both Charlton fans as well. So, but Hattie said that there was a point with Tom Petty where they were playing in Austin, Texas, and they were in a buggy so it was Tom Petty, Sharon Robinson, who was his co-writer, Hattie and Charlie, and they were in a golf buggy going to the stage. And Tom Petty turned around and said, I don't know that I can do this. And Leonard Cohen, similarly, Hattie was backstage with him before a gig in Vancouver. And they were getting some coffee and real rock and roll. And she looked over and his hand was shaking with a coffee cup in it. And he saw her looking and he said, yeah, I know, even after all these years. And these are people who we look to and we think, can you imagine having that confidence?
Mm.
And Leonard Cohen is shaking before he goes on stage. I know what I'm like before a big gig.
Yeah.
People look at me, they say, how do you do it? You're never nervous. So you don't know the half of it.
Yeah.
So I think it's understanding that
Human, we're
it's
all human
normal.
beings. That's
Yeah,
what we
it's
are in
normal.
the end. Yeah,
Yeah.
we're all the same. So what? Tell us a little bit more about that book, because I think that helps people in so many different. Even if they don't have a sort of a massive sort of career mission at this point in
Yeah.
time, everybody suffers a bit from, vulnerability. Don't want to be vulnerable. Don't want to sort of let people know that they haven't got it all together. All those things. So what sort of things would you, I mean, that book is absolutely intriguing, but give people a few sort of ideas of what's in it.
Well, so the structure is we look at, first of all, why we don't ask for help. So I shared the story about why I wrote the book, and that's how I go into why this is such an important thing. Then I talk about what holds us back. So, we've touched on looking good, being strong, these types of drivers. I look at then, okay, if you accept that you need to ask for help, what's your strategy for doing so? How do you approach it? And we look at things like mentoring and masterminding. So there's the more formal approaches, as well as, just look for people you trust, understand what you want to get out of it, and here's how you approach them. And we look at the personal responsibility in taking action and how that works. Alongside that, I look at things like the differences between gender, differences between culture, differences between generation. In terms of asking for help, we've done some original research out in the States in terms of the link between self-compassion and gratitude and vulnerability. So it's quite a deep dive into it. And it's a mixture. I interviewed 40 or 50 people from all over the world for the book. And they range from people you won't have heard of. I interviewed my niece, to find out, how the millennial generation approach this, and friends of mine, and just people I came across who had an amazing story, through to celebrities, so Sir Clive Woodward, Joe Swinson, James Cleverley, Lil Mackenzie, the former Norwich and Sheffield Wednesday striker.
Yeah.
And it's a mixture of their stories and their expertise. So some very, very powerful stories of, people who have come close to suicide, and who have really recognised where support comes in.
And I think that's so important, actually, because I'm sure you've experienced times, I certainly have, where, and this has happened both ways, where I've sort of, something has happened and I've thought, if only you'd asked, if you should have asked, I could have helped you or said something or pointed you in the right direction. And I've had it come back at me as well. Oh my goodness, you should have asked. And how often have we, I'm sure that's come out in your interviews as well, that people don't like to, they don't want to be an imposition. Really should, because then everybody really wants to sort of help when they can, don't they?
Well, they do. Well, the book is dedicated, as well as to my father, who passed away just before it was finalised. It's dedicated to a guy called Richard, and I'd share his story in the prologue. And Richard was someone who passed away just as I was on this journey that led to the book. And I went to the memorial service. I couldn't make the funeral, which was standing room only. I went to the memorial service, and like all these things, 30, 40 people stood up and talked about his qualities. And everyone said the same thing. He always helped other people. He never asked for help himself. And I found out the next day he'd taken his own life. And look, the book, we're supporting a mental health charity, My Black Dog, through the book, because there's a strong mental health element. And this is obviously very topical at the moment as well. And there are stories there, as I said, like Richard's, and others which didn't have the tragic end but came very close. But it's not just about people who got pushed that far. It can be as simple as, I don't know how to deal with it, write this proposal. It can be as simple as, I'm unhappy in my role and I don't know what to do about it. And just finding people to talk to. It doesn't have to get to that stage. It can just be unclogging something that's blocking you in the smallest possible way. But our pride stops us from asking for help and making our life easier.
Well, I think it's
across the range.
I think it's a great perspective as well on relationship building, because very often if people can sort of come at it from a perspective, okay, I've got to build this network, and as I said at the beginning, that our mindset is a function of who we spend our time with, etc. And we can come at it from one dimension, which is quite self-serving, and I'm going to build this network now to achieve what I want to achieve. But actually, a great way, and you've said this to me before, a great way of also sort of nurturing your network is, even if you haven't got anything to ask, or even if you feel too, you don't want to be vulnerable, you don't want to ask or whatever, one of the great things to really sort of nurture your network is just to ask what you can do for everybody else, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, one of the things that we've found out through the interviews for the book was that a lot of people struggle with asking for help for themselves, but they find it a lot easier to ask for help for other people or for a cause.
Yeah.
And I don't want that to distract from seeking the support that you need when you need it. But if you can either reframe the help that you need in terms of how it's going to help your family, how it's going to help your colleagues, how it's going to make other people's life easier, or you can use asking for help for others as a way to, and let's sort of bring this over into the, your body means business ethos, as a way of building the muscle and exercising that help reflex, if you like, that help muscle, then that's fantastic. I think absolutely. My favorite saying, which I share so often, comes from Elizabeth Asquith Bibesco, who was a poet and author and the former Prime Minister, Lord Asquith's daughter. And she said, "Blessed are they who give without remembering and receive without forgetting." And we should always be seeking to give to our network, not to gain, not for recognition or anything else, but because we can. And because if everyone did that, then everyone succeeds and the help comes back to us in spades that way. So I think that that's a great ethos to have. But ultimately, when you need help, you should be ready to ask for it.
Yeah, and I think that ethos is very much why you have such a huge network, Andy, because that's always, in the years I've known you, you're so giving to your network. You're always so helpful, so quick, to make suggestions, and in all of those eyes that you mentioned. And so I'm personally very grateful for that. I'm sure many others are as well. If people want to find out more about you, more about your books and the sort of services that I know you work with a lot of corporates, you speak globally on this subject, you have your books, etc. Where's the best for them to go? Where should they find more about you?
Yeah, the best place to go, and I'm hoping I remember this correctly because I've just set it up at the weekend, is link.tree/Andy Lopata.
They'll probably find that link on your Instagram bio, will they, or somewhere like that?
Yes, they will. It is in my Instagram bio. Good spot. With the beauty of a name like mine is I'm easy to find. And if you want the books, best thing is just go to Amazon and type in my name if you're happy buying from Amazon. Or I think, is it bookshop.co.org, which is the new network for independent bookshops. But they've only got a couple of my books in stock when I looked earlier in the week. And yeah, I'm across social media, and with my name, I'm quite easy to find. The podcast, if you can't find the Linktree link, the podcast is podfollow.com/connected leadership.
Okay, well, we'll put all of those in the notes to this as well. So much more that we could talk about today. And for those of you listening, I hope you found that useful. I'm sure you have. But like I say, there's much more where that came from if you follow on Andy's links. And if you want to hear more generally about Your Body Means Business, as I've said, this whole ethos and this whole program is based on the fact that if you get those two foundations strong, firstly, your physical body, then what you can see is going on the outside when you have a strong physical body obviously goes on the inside as well. Strong body really helps with a strong mindset, and then of course there are all these different aspects of building your mindset, such as the relationship buildings we've just mentioned, and that then enables you to achieve your mission, and whatever that mission is, whether it is building a business, enhancing your career, whatever it is. So you want to hear more about all of that in a holistic fashion. I do some live webinars. I've got one tomorrow, the link will come up, one on Sunday. Or if you actually want to even join the YBMB program, we've just started the winter season, would love to have you on there. We work with midlife professionals, and we cover all of those aspects, upgrading your mindset, transforming your body, and rapidly increasing your income, either through building a business or changing your career. So if you want to hear all of that, then click on the link as well. So thank you so much, Andy. I really appreciate it. Lovely to talk to you as always. And good luck with your podcasts and your books and all of the other useful stuff that you're doing. And I know you've been very busy in lockdown, so certainly no rest for you.
Well, I might take a couple of days on the 25th and 26th.
Oh, right.
Thanks. Thank you very much for having me, Angela.
Take care. See you. Bye-bye.
Thanks.